And I set up my phone on the tripod in the middle of the room, and I went and sat in a fireplace and took a picture myself.
Awesome. Yeah, man. I'm glad you brought that up because I forgot that you traveled a few times recently.
Yeah. Well, actually, that's one of the things I want to talk about is not just going to Portugal, but like why. And there's an article I'm starting research on that actually.
Yeah, if you send me some links afterwards, I can put anything in the description. If you have links that you want, like any university site, sub-site you're running or whatever, we can link that up.
Okay.
So, all right, well, I'm going to hit record on our audio.
Okay.
All right, here in the studio with Aaron McArthur, Dr. Aaron McArthur. Thank you so much for taking the time. It is nearing the end of spring break, and I'm working with Hausnick tomorrow, and he's doing a podcast. But like everybody is canceled with me in the morning. I guess they're just like, no, it's spring break. I'm taking the day off.
Well,
Forget about it.
I was at my office till about 2 last night trying to get some lectures recorded. So this actually is a good break. It's a good reason not to be working.
Yeah, are you doing those for online courses or?
Yeah. This semester I'm teaching historic preservation for the first time online, and the last unit, which is how to complete a National Register nomination, is what I'm working on. And it's supposed to start. That unit starts right after spring break, and it's not up. So I really need to get that unit up. But
yeah. So by trade, you are a historian, right. And I actually talked about you on a previous podcast, and also celebrity. You were on Pawn Stars. Funny story. That was one of the first things someone told me when. That's probably why I remember it when I see you. But then I watched the episode, of course, so maybe I'll tag that. But what type of historian would you classify like yourself as? I know what you're into, but
right. Well, my position at Tech is I'm the public history program director, and it's an interesting story how I got into public history. When I was an undergrad, I thought I was going to focus my studies on Russian history because I'd done quite a bit of reading on that. I thought it was interesting. Yeah, it's funny. I've forgotten so much of it now.
I'm doing Peter the Great, my next class.
Yeah,
just so you know.
But I got my bachelor's. Well, I finished my bachelor's. I went as an undergrad to North Idaho College, where I wrestled, University of Montana, and then I graduated from Idaho State. But at Idaho State, I took a class on the history of the U.S. West. And,
I love that class.
Yeah. And I'm from Polson, Montana, born and raised. And, I love the West. And I came to realize, hey, I'm a lot more interested in where I'm from and what formed me than I was and what happened in Russia. And then, well, I didn't have to learn Russian either. That was a great benefit. And so when I was going to grad school, I was looking at places that had a good history of the U.S. West program. Kansas, Utah State, UNLV, some of the best in the country. And UNLV said, "Here's some money. Come to school with us." So UNLV it was. Well, when I got there, my intention was just to do the traditional history stuff, and I knew about public history, but my perception of public historians were, hey, you might have a degree in history, but you work in the gift shop at some local site, and you sell the books that the real historians write.
Yeah.
But
that seems I get that a little bit. Yeah.
But when I was in grad school, not only did I take some classes because I thought, oh, this sounds interesting. I got recruited to write some National Register nominations and do some other research, and not just recruited, I got paid for it. And what became my dissertation was I was actually working on a grant for the National Park Service. I got paid $70,000 to write a history of St. Thomas, Nevada.
Yes.
So I wrote this report, this book, and then turned it into my dissertation. So my book was actually at the University of Nevada Press, working on getting it published as a book. At the same time, I was defending the dissertation version of it.
Yeah, I remember you doing a lecture over it, and we talked about it. So you wanna debrief everyone over what the thesis of that book is about, because it's some fascinating history, and I was super into the lecture you gave when you gave it. It's been a few years since I've heard you talk about it, but you just did this research right there when you were at UNLV and conveniently located nearby, right?
Right. Well, the topic is history of a town, former town, St. Thomas, Nevada. St. Thomas should be under Lake Mead now, but according to various studies and our current water usage patterns, it's never going to be under the water again. In fact, Lake Mead, they had to move the water intake where the Las Vegas Valley gets its drinking water. They had to move it further down into the reservoir, and the intakes for Hoover Dam are actually in danger of coming out of the water. They're using so much. Anyways,
when is this going on right now? Like 2018?
Right now.
Wow.
Right
I know
now.
I sent you a picture of Lake Mead last time I was in Vegas, which was when I trained with Hickson, I believe, and it was super low, you said.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's wild. I know California had an issue with drought and stuff, but it seemed like their water supplies kind of come back a little bit.
Well, part of the problem is when the government was deciding, the Bureau of Reclamation, let's be more specific here, was trying to figure out exactly how much water could be used from the Columbia River, or not Columbia, the Colorado River. They spent 10 years doing surveys of how much water went down the Colorado River. And they figured out, like California gets 4.5 million acre feet, Arizona 1.5 million acre feet, Nevada 300,000, and the other 4 states in the Colorado River Basin, I don't remember exactly how much they get. But the problem is that 10 years where they looked at rainfall, when you start looking at tree rings and other indicators of the past environment, that was the wettest decade in 500 years. And this was actually before we built Lake Powell and Lake Mojave and other giant reservoirs on the Colorado River in the middle of the Mojave Desert, which creates huge amounts of evaporation. Basically, Lake Mead's never going to be full again. But at any rate, the town itself, once it came out of the water, it's in the middle of the Lake Mead National Recreation Area, which is one of the most visited units in the National Park Service. Of the 417 units they control, it's in the top 5 of annual visitors. And once it came out of the water, people started hiking down there, and the Park Service realized that they needed to be able to interpret the history of the place. And they didn't know anything about it other than a bunch of foundations and stuff. And so they offered this a contract to research and write the history. And the town was established 1865. Brigham Young sent a bunch of Mormons down there to grow cotton because in the midst of the Civil War, not a whole lot of cotton was coming from the South, and people don't like walking around naked, and wool's a little hot. So, hey, let's go grow our own cotton. And then, speed way up, government comes in, buys everyone out, and the town goes under. And my book just kind of traces,
which is like FDR era. I mean, it was because the Hoover Dam being built, or
the planning for it actually started in 1919. The first government surveys went out to do it, but the actual construction of the dam, that was one of the largest projects that was undertaken by the was it the WPA and what is the New Deal? Yeah.
So that's fascinating.
So one of my favorite stories about this guy named Hugh Lords. He didn't believe that that St. Thomas was actually ever going to go underwater, because it's like 60 miles from the dam site. He thought there's no way the water's ever going to get there. And he became a believer one day when he woke up and there was water swirling around his bed. So he said, it might be a good day to get out of here. And so he packed up what he could in a boat. And
luckily he had a boat.
And drug it out. And on his way out, he lit his house on fire.
Oh, man.
And I was doing research at Special Collections in UNLV. I found a picture of a shack on fire with a rowboat next to it, with water. I don't know for sure that it was Hugh Lord's place because of, it wasn't written on the back.
Did multiple people burn their houses, you think?
I don't have an account of anyone else doing it. So I am 80% positive that it's Hugh Lord's place, but I can't say for absolute certain it is. But anyway, I have the picture in my book. That's
well, what was the name of your book again?
St. Thomas, Nevada: A History Uncovered. So,
literally,
yeah,
literally uncovered. Yeah, that's just a fascinating story. Because just in our area here, we had a similar project from the same era on our river, on the Arkansas River, which flooded and created all these Lake Dardanelle and all these things that are around us, which there's a ton of shoreline that was created because of that flooding. Right over here by the studio and the house is all this backwater, basically.
Oh yeah, and if you look at the Illinois Bayou, which you're talking about from the air, then you can definitely see that whole area was sculpted by man. Well, sculpted by someone who wanted to do a lot of fishing, apparently.
Yeah. We'll see the old Dwight Mission. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah. When people talk about Indian removal in the Cherokee, Trail of Tears and all that, they tend to think that they left Georgia and went to Indian Territory, Oklahoma, whereas in reality is they stopped here first. I mean, Arkansas was part of the Cherokee Reservation until enough white people moved here and said, nah, we want this land too. You keep going further west. And the Dwight Mission was a Methodist, isn't it? I think it was.
I can't remember.
A Methodist mission. I'm just going to say it is, and someone can put in the comments, you're an idiot. It was something else. That was, a mission to Native Americans, trying to convert them to Christianity. And my understanding is the actual site of it was kind of over by where A&O is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But is
Let's
now
cover
gone.
up that with a nuclear power plant.
Yeah. There is one physical site left that's associated with Washburn Cemetery down by Lock and Dam.
Yes.
Where the wife of what was the leader's name? Asa. No.
I cannot remember. I'm a poor Arkansas historian.
Yeah, well, I mean, my degree is a history of the U.S. West. I had to laugh because I'm like, I just got a doctorate in the history of the U.S. West. Let's move to Arkansas.
I know. Let's move to we're not, I guess, are we deep south? I don't know.
I don't know. I got to clarify. It's not like I don't like Arkansas. It was just never on the radar.
It is a beautiful state, surprisingly, for as bad of a reputation. And I like in that course how that's focused on, like the image, of the state, and my rebuttals are, at least we're not Alabama
or
Mississippi or Louisiana, and we didn't want to be a slave state.
Yeah.
So there's that. Man, there were over 700 battles in the Civil War fought in Arkansas.
Yeah.
It's wild to me.
And this is one of the reasons why I like public history, is because a lot of people, when they talk about the Civil War, they think about Gettysburg. Is Gettysburg important? Absolutely. But if you're from Arkansas, wouldn't it be more interesting to study about Pea Ridge? Because you could actually go there and check it out.
Prairie Grove,
or know that there was a well in Russellville that was essentially neutral ground, that we have documentation of Union and Confederates hanging out there in the same general area, not killing each other because access
hey, Phil,
to the well.
We'll see you on the battlefield.
Yeah. or the Pope County Militia War after the Civil War was over. You know,
I know nothing about that.
Yeah, see, that's my point. Reconstruction. We know that there was a lot of hate and discontent, but do our students here in Russellville read or get taught about that hate and discontent, or Clarksville? I mean, Johnson County is just one county over. Wouldn't you have been interested to know about the Pope
Yes,
County Militia
because
War?
there was a lot of that, and too, in Johnson County, there was a lot of murdering that went on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would be fascinated to know that. And there's several counties. But in Arkansas history, we didn't really touch our counties. That was ironic.
Which is ridiculous, because one of the things I think my major job as a public historian is to reach the public. And you're like, oh, well, that's fairly obvious. But the way that you have to reach the public is you have to make people see themselves in the story, because until the average person, I mean, we're kind of freaks of nature as historians. We're interested in weird stuff that people say, oh, well, how does that relate to me? Well, I guess that's the point. You got to show people how the history relates to them. Like, let me give you an example. It's like, do you know anything about the Battle of Hastings?
Not off the top of my head.
Do you know when it was?
1266.
1066. So you got the 66 right. And you see, like, most people, if you study in high school, the Battle of Hastings was important, happened in 1066. So freaking what? See, they need to see themselves in it. So let me tell you why you personally are impacted by the Battle of Hastings. So Battle of Hastings is when William the Conqueror, or William of Normandy, or my personal favorite, William the Bastard, because he was illegitimate, defeated the Viking dude at Hastings and became the King of England. Now, the reason that this matters to us is that English is not a Romance language, but it has a lot of similarities to Romance languages. And that's because William the Conqueror won in 1066. English is a Germanic language. William was a Frenchman, spoke French. The court language in England, while he was king, was French. And that French and English kind of got all mushed together into what we now use as English. So
no way. You just blew my mind.
The very words coming out of your mouth right now, the words you're saying, the verbs that the vowels you're using, they're impacted by the outcome of the Battle of Hastings.
Because of a bastard.
Because of a bastard.
That is epic.
Your keyboard right here, you got a QWERTY.
A QWERTY, of course, yeah.
It's Christopher Scholl's in it was like the 1860s. He came up. There were a lot of different layouts for typewriters. He used this one because it was deliberately inefficient. Most people are right-handed, so he put the most used letters on the left hand, because if people typed on his typewriter too fast, it jammed. And so he thought, if I can make this a little bit harder to use, then it's not gonna jam. And so what you have right here is a solution to a 150-year-old problem that no longer exists, and yet
we haven't come up with a better way to do it.
No, it works just fine.
Yeah,
so I like it.
Do you think that there would be? I mean, it would be so hard. Mm-hmm. I mean, you would just have to start like the kids. But, I mean, it would be generations of catching up with the new method. And
it would be worthless. I mean, people that like the Dvorak thing, they say, well, it's laid out more efficiently. And studies have shown that if you change to a Dvorak, once you're used to it, you are no more efficient or speedy than you are on a QWERTY layout. And, once your brain gets used to where the letters are, you can go as fast as you can go. So there's no point in changing.
I had to do my Guam to get my adjuncting position. I had to turn in my Guam, my gross words a minute or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had to do that. And
what's your typing speed?
I don't remember. It was good. I didn't feel like it had gone down. I had to put it on I had to add it to my resume. I can't remember what it was though.
I know when I hated taking typing in high school. I'm so glad I took it.
Me too.
But when I graduated from high school, I typed 30 words a minute, and when I graduated with my bachelor's, I typed at 30 words a minute, and my first 2 years of grad school, I typed about 30 words a minute. But I was more accurate. But now I'm probably at about 80 or something. I will never get faster than that because I'm spastic. But
I feel like I'm over 100, but I have errors. It was over 100, but I have errors. And it was over 100 when I was in high school, so it's like it hasn't gone up.
If I want to be accurate, I got to keep it about 75 or 80.
Yeah, it goes down. Yeah, it went down to about that because I had to calculate how many, like it like graded me on errors, basically.
It's funny talking about typing. It's like I'm very picky about my keyboards. My keyboard in my office in Witherspoon is a mechanical IBM Model M. It was manufactured in April of 1988. I have to have this special adapter so you can even plug it into a modern computer. But
is that what I'm going to need for the podcast?
Well, I don't know that you'd want to use it for a podcast because it is loud. It clacks a whole lot. But I love it because you get a lot of feedback. Like when you push the key down, you feel exactly when it breaks, when it hits the letter, and you don't have to push it all the way down for the letter to register. So it's not quite as jarring.
What do you do when one of them goes out? You've just always been able to get another one.
You pull the keycap off, and each switch in there is individually replaceable. Or if the spring breaks, you can replace the spring, put a new keycap on it, and go. That's part of the beauty of it. Is like this. That's probably a little metal dome over a contact switch, and when the rubber that's around the metal dome wears out, it's dead, and you have to replace the entire keyboard to replace a dead key. And that's not going to matter for the life of the
I think it's going to be this C key right here for some reason.
Oh yeah. Well, my son is a gamer, so that's WASD.
Yeah.
They're the where the letters are printed on, it's all getting worn off.
Yeah, that's what's happening. I think it's from so much like moving data around. Like that's the copy.
Oh, you hit Control C?
Yeah, that's the copy button.
My wife does not use keyboard shortcuts.
I need to know more. I've been using the screenshot one a lot. I'm looking forward to getting into this broadcasting software that this always happens, ironically. Like when the person comes over, it's like, hey, so great to see you. Let's immediately start talking about cool stuff and not on the podcast.
Yeah.
But we were talking about cool computer stuff before we started recording. So.
Yeah. And one of the classes I teach is digital history, and part of that's a reflection of in graduate school. I got really into building computers, and there are a lot of digital tools that I like to use that really make your life easier. Like for example, my dissertation file on my hard drive is 30 gigs. And there's a lot of pictures, but most...
Yeah, you do integrate pictures really well into your stuff. I remember remarking on.
But most of it are PDFs of documents. And I just take my laptop and scanner with me to archives. And instead of reading stuff at the archives, if I remotely think something's going to be interesting, I scan it, run optical character recognition on it, and then Acrobat or Adobe Reader will allow you to search within a directory, not just within a document. So like, for example, I have Brigham Young's letterpress, which is basically all his outgoing mail for over 30 years, and it's all been transcribed. So I ran OCR on it, and the file that it's in is almost 8 gigs. It's over 10,000 individual pages of data, and I can search within that directory for keywords.
That's huge, man.
Yeah, like when I show it to my students, like I'm writing, I have a partial draft for a book on Pipe Spring, Arizona. So like I type in pipe, and it comes up all of the PDFs in that directory that have pipe, and you can show the word in context. So it's like if it's talking about copper pipe, you're like, oh, I'm not interested in that. And you see one that says Pipe Springs, and it opens up that individual PDF. And
wow.
And if you're using Acrobat, you can then go into the document properties and add keywords, like hashtags. It's the same way on Instagram. If you want to search for something in particular, search for a hashtag, you can create your own keywords. Or the reason I use Acrobat, even though you have to pay for it instead of Reader, is that you can then add comments And so I type my comments in. Then all my comments are searchable when I run those searches as well. So all of my notes to myself come up when I run the search, and then I don't have to remember stuff.
How often do you teach that course? Every year?
Just about. We've been talking about, Dave and I have been talking about making it a required course for the regular history major as well.
I think I was in grad school when you started working at Tech. Is that true?
2012.
Would have been about that time.
Yeah.
Or I would have been a senior. I didn't get to take you for any courses, though. I took Pearson for the Frontier.
Right.
Which was a great course. I was just ran into the Turner thesis recently. I have a copy of it, too. So it came up a couple of times recently. But that was such an interesting course to me. I really enjoyed it. I sent him a message telling him happy birthday. And I was just reminiscing on how much I enjoyed that class. Have you taught that class as well?
No. I mean, and I could, because that's what my degree is in U.S. West. And man, if
you're in high demand on your other courses.
Well,
though.
Yeah. I mean, and not just that. Is Pearson is our U.S. West historian. I mean, that is his job.
Yeah, he is,
and he does a good job.
Is he going to do Civil War now?
We're hiring a 19th century person that can teach Civil War, New South, African American history and stuff. I'm on the hiring committee, and right now we've got maybe 20 applicants. David Blanks, the department chair, is expecting about 70 or 80 applicants judging from previous searches. So
yeah, wow, yeah, that's Dr. DeBike, such a fascinating character.
Yeah.
But he got into the professing game late. I think he was in his 40s, mid-40s or something.
He taught middle school, and then he was a middle school principal. Oh man, dude, to me, like, dealing with kids that age, that's like herding cats.
Oh man, you've said that again, remarked, because you've helped us teach kids classes at the gym. Yeah.
Look, something shiny.
Oh man. Remember, we used to have this TV up on the wall that somebody donated, and like one kid would just like get so distracted, and it wasn't even on, but he would get so distracted by it. More than one kid over time, actually, but it's funny.
Was it like on was that Disney, the Princess and the Frog, the bug in the bug zapper? It's so pretty.
Oh man, yeah. So one thing that's so we remarked on Native Americans recently in the conversation. You grew up on a reservation.
Yeah,
is that correct?
born and raised on the Flathead Indian Reservation, which didn't have flatheads on it. It's the Salish and the Kootenai. Because the Salish and the Kootenai had pushed the Flatheads further west, because the Blackfeet had pushed the Salish and Kootenai from the plains into the mountains.
Some of the scariest accounts I read, and I think the book is called Wild and Perilous. Mm-hmm. I've got it on the shelf in there. Was a tale about these guys floating by on a canoe, and I think it was a few guys, and there's some Blackfeet, and they just pulled them out and like killed all of them but one, stripped them naked, and was like,
they were some serious a-holes. I mean, the thing is that part of why the Salish and the Kootenai and various other tribes signed the Hellgate Treaty in 1855 is because they thought that the federal government would protect them from the Blackfeet. And the Blackfeet, to me, are a good reason why you can't talk about the Indians as kind of a monolithic group, because it's a pretty good indicator that there are various groups that either like each other or don't like each other. And in the case of Blackfeet, it's not just that they hate white people. I mean, they hate everybody. Or they did. I haven't been to Browning for a long time. Maybe they've mellowed out. But when I was growing up, man, Blackfoot was not a town that you really wanted to go hang out in if you were white.
Interesting. Were either one of your parents a Native American by blood, or
no? And actually, the reason that we were there, it's just a place to move. See, most reservations you just didn't want to or could not move there unless you were white. But the Dawes Severalty Act in 70s, 80s there. It basically said, all right, all you Indians, we're going to force you to be farmers. We're going to take your reservation land and divide it up in between members of your tribe, and this land is your land, and you're just going to own it. Except for, hey, when we do the math, if we give you all good-sized acreages of land, that leaves a whole bunch of land left over in the reservation. Hey, let's sell that to white people. And that's what happened to the Flathead Reservation. Is by far most of the reservation is owned by whites. I mean, a lot of the land that's still reservation land is like up in the Mission Mountains, where you absolutely cannot farm it because it's in the mountains. And the tribe owns various plots of land, but most of the land is owned by whites. And so, like, you go to my high school, less than a quarter of the students were Native American. Well, it depends on how you count it, because each tribe is able to determine what blood quantum is required for being a member of the tribe. So, like, the Foxwood Casino in Connecticut, I can't remember what tribe owns that, but you have to be 1/64th of whatever that tribe is to be a member of the tribe. So that makes you an Indian. 1/64th, really? Yeah. And on the Flathead Res, I think it's half. But I have a nephew that's a quarter.
More, right?
Yeah, but and to me it's crazy that if you are an Indian who marries a German, and their kid marries a German, and their kid marries a German, you're a German. You're not. But in a lot of tribes, oh no, you're Indian because your great-great-grandfather was, and see that,
trying to get those numbers, man.
Yeah, and then it's about politics, and it's not. It has nothing to do with.
What do are there like certain tribal exemptions or allotments based off population? Is that what they're trying to like say one tribe, they need those numbers to be a certain amount, so they count a quarter or a 64th?
It could be. I mean, and it's it's like I said, it's up to each individual tribe, and it could be at that point that hey, we have a casino, so we want to limit who gets their part of the proceeds from it, or who we have to actually provide medical care for, or whatever. I don't want to get any hate mail from Native Americans. I mean, if you've been raised to that, that's your culture, that's how you identify, you feel Native American, I got no problem with that. And the tribe is an autonomous unit. They can make whatever rules they want for membership in their own private club that they want. And we have the United States assigned treaty saying that, hey, you have that right. So more power to them.
I'm sure a lot of people try to be Native American so they can get free. Well, there's like a whole office, I feel like, at Tech dedicated to like, oh, are you Native American? We'll come into this office and we'll take care of your financial aid or whatever.
The thing is, though, is that a lot of that has to do with United States treaty obligations. And, some people saying, well, they're sponging on the government looking for things that are free. It's like, well, they are accessing things that they are entitled to by treaty. And if the United States didn't want to offer any of those benefits, they shouldn't have offered the treaty. And, a lot of what the government offered in treaties was commodities. Here, we'll give you, cows and seeds and, whatever. Well, that's not the way our economy functions anymore. So if you want to give people what they're entitled to by treaty, sometimes it might come in as a cash payment. It might come as tuition assistance. And, having lived on a reservation, and on my mission, I served a mission for my church. I spent 6 months on the White Mountain Apache Reservation.
Wow.
And let me tell you that most people that want to maintain your traditional culture and live on a reservation, it's not like they're living high on the hog. A lot of them are living in abject poverty, and they have faced generations of systematic discrimination, and so poverty becomes a generational thing. Our society might be more equitable, might be more open, but if you have 3 generations of people that have been living on some kind of welfare and have been, your parents and grandparents and great-grandparents have been telling you your entire life about how you're not going to get a fair shake, how the system's stacked against you, because it was, and in some ways still is. Are you going to be willing to, put yourself out there and say, oh, I'll give the white guys a chance. Maybe this time they won't, kill us all and take our stuff. I can understand why the level of trust would be pretty dang low.
Yeah. Hey, this is while I'm thinking about it. There's a podcast I want to tell you about. I can't remember the exact name of the exact podcast, but I'll tell you the premise. It's by this guy named Danelli Benelli.
Okay.
And
is he Swiss? Benelli's a
Swiss name.
He's
it's the way it's spelled. He's either Spanish or Italian. I can't remember, but I think that he's from Spain. So but he talks just like this. I was just talking to her yesterday. We had this lady at the gym, Paula. She actually is a professor at Tech also, in world languages. Okay. And they talk very similar. They really elongate a lot of their speech. And it's fascinating to listen to them. With their accent is very thick, but totally understandable. Mm-hmm. So this Danelli Benelli guy did a comparison between the Sand Creek Massacre and My Lai.
Well, and that makes a lot of sense in that My Lai it's all about colonialism. I mean, the reason that we ended up in Vietnam is the French couldn't keep control of their colony and asked us to step in and help. And then we got communism all mixed up in that, we can't let the Southeast Asia fall to communism. But I mean, the reason that we ended up in there in the first place was about colonialism. I wrote a paper when I was in grad school comparing the ghost dance on the Central Plains with a movement in South Africa known as the Xhosa cattle killing. The Xhosa. If you've ever seen the movie The Gods Must Be Crazy,
I have not.
Anyways, it's like from the 70s. The guy talks with clicks.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, I've seen that.
Yeah, well, those people. Yeah. The Xhosa is how you say their name, and the X is supposed to be a click. Anyways, they had a movement there known as the cattle killing, and the idea was that if you kill off all of the cattle that are polluted by whiteness, I guess, then the cattle would come back. The ancestors would come back to life. They would push out the white people, and everything would be great again. Well, in the ghost dance, that was the idea that Wovoka, it was from the Pyramid Lake Reservation, or he's from northern Nevada. He claimed to have a vision from the Great Spirit, God, whatever, that if you did the ghost dance, and if you did that, then the buffalo would come back.
Wonkintonka.
The ancestors would come back. The white man would be swept away. I mean, both of these are classical millenarian movements that, if you return to the traditions that you have forsaken, then something great will happen to drive out the invading conquerors, and a millennium of peace and happiness is going to ensue. And it is a classic response to colonialism. I mean, you see it in the Central Plains of the United States. You see it in South Africa, in Indonesia, Southeast Asia.
Wow. Yeah, that's he was talking about there being like 3 kinds of people at each spot. People that they did not want to participate at all. Mm-hmm. People that tried to stop it, mm-hmm. and then people that were happy to be doing it.
Well, and and talk about happy to be doing it. And I think that's a really important point. And the reasons why people are happy to be participating can vary. I mean, there are definitely going to be people that like, I miss the old ways. I really believe in our traditional worldview, our traditional gods, whatever the case may be. But one of the points I make in my paper is like, Sitting Bull or various people in South Africa, they were politicians. They recognized that they could use this traditional movement to reassert political authority over their people and emerge as a strong leader, emerge with a lot of influence. And so they were playing power games, and not being cynical. I mean, politicians,
real thing.
They want to lead, and a lot of times it could be for a good reason. They say, I have something great to offer. I can help save my people, whatever, but I'm the one smart enough to do it. So
what do you know, speaking of Sitting Bull, like what do you know about some of the crazy stuff they did? So like I was just it might have been the Spinelli guy, but they're talking about like how Crazy Horse would like cut all over his body. And I've seen and heard documentaries and things talking about how they would do like suspension and stuff like that, like and get like basically to the point where they are just like out of it and they have some sort of vision. Or I mean, I haven't really looked into that history, and it didn't really come up. But didn't Sitting Bull used to do some crazy vision quests like that or something?
My degree is in the history of the U.S. West. My focus was on Mormon community development.
Okay, well,
so I don't know.
Maybe they did crazy suspension stuff. That's word on the street.
Yeah,
we'll leave it at that.
In fact, most of my studies about Native Americans, other than general stuff, I did take classes and stuff on it, but I focus on relations between Mormons and Native Americans, and the Mormons generally had a lot better relationship with various Native American groups because Brigham Young, as he put it, is better to shoot them with biscuits.
There you go.
Look, in the long run, it's easier just to, when they come asking for food, give them food. He talks about, I have a great letter about a guy that steals from Southern Paiute, and he said this guy should be punished more for theft than a Paiute should be because, he should be better, he should know better. And I realize that's very... that might be condescending towards the Paiute, but in a sense, it was like, instead of saying they are less civilized or in some way less than us, we get to treat them like crap. It is our responsibility to act even kinder and better, and that always didn't work. I mean, look at Mountain Meadows. We made some mistakes here, but.
What? There's recently a show that came out on Netflix. I don't know if you heard about it or watched it. Very, very fascinating, called Godless. And the villain guy, the antagonist, he's played by Jeff Daniels. He's in that movie Gettysburg. I don't know if you ever saw it, but
no. Well, he's in Dumb and Dumber too.
Yeah, that too. But he plays this guy that was kidnapped in the Mountain Meadows situation, and
as a kid.
Yeah, and grew up in that community, and then he's like kind of like an ultra. I don't know. He's like almost like a minister type. When he gets older, he's like everything is about the faith and the Bible and so on. But it's very, very fascinating his character and everything. But so that wagon train left from like Harrison, Arkansas.
Yeah,
is it so? What from the perspective, because I guess maybe both sides of history, just being in your line of work. What is that? What is the story there?
Well, so I mean, let's get some background here. So, Mormons driven out of Kirtland, Ohio, go to Missouri. Lilburn Boggs, who's the governor of Missouri, issues an extermination order against Mormons. Kill them if you have to, but drive them out. We were driven out of the state. All our land was stolen. Women raped, men killed. We were driven out of Illinois, out of Nauvoo, Illinois. Joseph Smith was assassinated. Again, women raped, people murdered. I mean,
there's a lot of rape in history. I talked about that in my in my World Civ 2 class I'm teaching right now, and it's daunting.
Yeah, it horrifying. And so, I mean, when you have this kind of, part of why the Mormons end up in the Salt Lake Valley is it was Mexico. It's like, we're leaving the United States. We are out of here. And then, the Mexican-American War, it became part of the United States. So this is the backstory. It's like we have been driven out of every place that we have been, and Lilburn Boggs issues the extermination order. We go to Martin Van Buren, the president, and he's like, "Oh, your cause is just, but I can't help you." Sucks to be you. And this is the response that we get from the government. Okay, so now we got this group, the Fancher Party, leaving Arkansas and heading towards California. And as they're coming through, they're saying things like, "We're coming. You think you're safe."
So and sort of anti-Mormon sentiment.
Yeah, anti-Mormon sentiment. Now, there are a bunch of idiot bullies spouting off and stuff. And so now I do not want to suggest that the people that killed that party were justified. Absolutely not. They were wrong to do so. But you might understand why they felt like they needed to do it.
Yeah.
It's like, we're not going to get pushed out again. Maybe the Arkansans should have said, maybe this is not the brightest thing that we could say. Maybe we are vastly outnumbered here, and it wouldn't be very smart to do that. Now, and usually the controversy in that is people try and prove that Brigham Young directed that to happen. That's not borne out by the documentation.
Yeah, it's not verifiable. Everything is way after the fact where he's involved. Is that correct? Like, they have some correspondence maybe with the president or somebody.
Well, and a lot of it is like, what happened, man? And some of it was, damage control, in that not so much I don't want anyone to find out. It's like, this mess happened. How are we going to clean this mess up? I mean, because he was the territorial governor of the state. He had to be involved in the process of.
Did he run for president, Brigham Young, at some point?
No, Joseph Smith did, but Brigham Young didn't.
Okay.
And so, I don't know. It was not directed from Salt Lake. So.
Yeah, and that wasn't the perception I had either. One thing, and I don't know if it's a point of controversy, but this came up in that show, ironically, and it was more like I was like interested about how they threw it in the show, because they threw it in a couple of different ways. It was just like one of the undertones. There was also this like subplot with these buffalo soldiers. This like community that was outside, and then the town that it's based around. It was a mining town.
Okay,
and like all the men, like 86 men, died. So it's like a town of women next to a town of buffalo soldiers in this godless country. Okay. And it's like outlaws riding around robbing trains, and that guy Jeff Daniels is that guy. But it was they were talking about the Paiutes.
All right.
And he was like, yeah, some sort of massacre happened, and they tried to pin it on the Paiutes, but everybody knows. But that was, they slipped that in.
That was Mountain Meadows, because they did try and blame it on the Paiutes. They meaning a lot of the people in southern Utah that were involved in the massacre tried to say it was the Indians that did it.
Were there Indians there?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And they benefited from it like everyone else, I suppose.
Well, the southern Paiute really got screwed all the time. I mean, they were kind of stuck between the white people and the Navajo. And they were just trying to survive most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
Crazy
history, man.
Like in my book about Pipe Spring is a story about some Navajo came and were raiding in Mormon territory on the Arizona Strip. killed a couple people. Whitmore, I can't remember the other guy's name, and some of the Paiutes with them got some of the stuff from the raid because they were involved, and then the Navajo took off because the Navajo went home, and Mormons tracked down the Paiute and just started killing people. The militia showed up and was like, I mean, why would they not think they're guilty? It's like, look, you have some of the dude's stuff. You're wearing his pants, for goodness sakes. You are part of this, so we're going to take revenge on. If you look at the Mormon settlers' track records in regards to following the law and actual justice, not just the gun, it did a lot better than the average, but there was still they're people, and some people make stupid mistakes.
Well, it's just like I think about it this way. To an extent, it's like Elon Musk is talking about starting this colony on Mars,
right?
Which, let's say that happens.
Okay.
That's just, let's say that it is going to operate under the same laws that we operate under. Let's go set that up.
Okay.
Like, what's that going to look like? There's a documentary that just hit Netflix about this, we'll call it a cult. This guy, the Bagram Osha,
that guy in Oregon?
Ranjeesh, Ranjee.
Yeah, I know. I actually read an article about that yesterday.
Wild documentary. Like, we were kind of sympathetic about their plight, and then it's like, oh, they're just into Kundalini yoga or whatever, and then we saw this crazy weird sex orgy, and it was like, whoa, why is that? Why they're hitting each other? What?
Or like when one of them went into town and sprayed salmonella over a buffet.
Oh, there was a
sick.
Couple acts of bioterror. It was a weird documentary. I actually watched like 4 out of the 6 episodes, and I was like,
you watch a lot more Netflix than I do.
Yeah, I watch that. I like Amazon Prime. And so, I have a whole show of the podcast I do called After the Show.
Right.
And where basically, if I binge watch a show, what did I about? The Goliath. I just most recently binge watched that. I'm probably going to do a review on that. Billy Bob Thornton, Arkansas native. So there's, it gives you an opportunity to talk about cool stuff I like. So if you ever have a favorite movie or something you want to talk about on the podcast, we can watch it while we commentate on it. That's why I'm looking forward to getting this broadcast software and learning what I can do and what videos I can pull up. And on my audio only, it's way less for me to worry about.
Right.
But with what I'm really trying to get plugged into monetizing our YouTube channels and monetizing individual podcasts and things of that nature.
How many views do you have to get before you actually, is it 300 before you actually start getting something back from views?
So it's gone up a lot. So I'm late to the scene only in that regard. So I have 12 months to get 4,000 watch hours. That'll be pretty easy, actually. I'm like 30-40% there or something.
Yeah. Thanks for watching.
Yeah. So, and once I start going live, that'll be helpful. That's one of the reasons I got that little tripod is I'm going to set up and go live on my other devices periodically just to get the YouTube live. Give me more video.
That seems so weird to me that I mean, what we're doing right here, the people would have at least to my perception, would have the same experience watching it live or watching it recorded.
I know you would think, but I guess you get more subscribers and stuff like
comments
that. I wouldn't be if I had a producer. So if you ever run into anybody in your neck of the woods that wants to be a podcasting producer, send them over here. Because I'm trying to do 5 shows a week. That's my goal. I'm taking a podcasting masterclass, and that's kind of the goal I've set. And so me doing solo reviews or commentating, one of the biggest viewed podcasts I had was an audio-only podcast on YouTube about a Hickson Gracie seminar. In Tokyo that got uploaded, and I was like, I was trained with Hickson. As a matter of fact, I was his partner when he was promoted to red belt, and he also showed this and at this seminar, and I learned that from Jack and just commentating on it, and man, it got really good feedback. So I don't know if it's the hashtags, I haven't figured out this formula, but I got to get 1,000 subscribers And then I have to get, there's some other third tier. There's so 10,000 total channel views. And I've got several thousand channel views already. I feel like several thousand, like 2,000 or something. Huh. So, I mean, I'm doing okay, but like I haven't made a mad rush on like I'm getting all that in order. I just applied to make a Wikipedia page. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to do a website right now. And I'm on like 8 total audio platforms. I got on Spotify, and they submitted it to like 2 other platforms. And I'm on iTunes and Stitcher, and I don't know. Like there's the platforms I'm on I didn't even sign up for. So, but they have all my podcasts there. I got a little custom thumbnail I do for all my podcasts. So it's been cool figuring out how to do all of it. But like the steps I'm wanting to go, I need like we were talking about for the podcast, I need a really good computer setup to be able to run it by myself with minimal, like this is too much on the table.
Right.
You know, I would like it. That's why I like the idea of having a 4-person podcast with no mic stands on the table.
Right.
Eventually, I'm going to go all in on the mic stands and get some really nice booms. And that's what I did with this Yeti. It's called a Compass, and ball bearings and whatnot.
Yeah, funny. Podcasting is one of the things that I teach, and it's just at a basic level by teaching my digital history class, because one of my all-time favorite podcast series is the BBC's History of the World in 100 Objects. Have you ever looked at that?
No, I have
so
not.
It's just
I love BBC stuff, though.
They took went to the British Museum and picked out 100 different objects that show the whole sweep of human history, starting with this like 2 million year old hand axe from the Rift Valley in Mozambique or anyways Zimbabwe, and ending with a credit card. Yeah.
From Wakanda. Have you seen Black Panther?
I have not.
It's so good, dude.
I just saw Thor Ragnarok.
I haven't seen it yet. Okay, so here I didn't watch Thor 2. So here's a series of podcasts I kind of want to do. I want to do a movie by movie breakdown of the Marvel movies. You know, that would be cool. So I'm doing like a 1968 series of podcasts. I got all these little ideas.
This is one of the things that let me know I married the right person, because my wife's like, all right, so which Marvel movies have we not seen yet? You know, we gotta.
Yeah, now the thing is to watch them in order, apparently.
Right.
So, there's a certain ordering to them that kind of culminates in maybe Infinity War. So, but yeah, Black Panther. It was really good, dude. I did a review on it on the podcast.
Yeah, so. And see, that's one thing that I haven't seen it yet, so I guess I don't really know, but I'm glad that it's just a good movie. That it doesn't have to be, it's about
I really
African American pride or anything like that. It's like, no, dude, it's a good movie.
Even outside, take it out of the Marvel universe. Yeah, it's a good movie.
Yeah.
Just take it out, just like the original Spider-Man movies and the reboot. Just take them out. That's like somebody we were talking about that the other day. It was like, those Tobey Maguire ones, those are good, and then they had that Garfield dude, those are good. You can forget about those. Just get them out.
It's like the Ang Lee Hulk.
Yeah.
That one sucked.
Yeah. That's the one with Eric Bana, right?
Yeah.
Now the one with Edward Norton.
That one's pretty good.
And Edward Norton's my Hulk, man. I got a hard time accepting Mark Ruffalo, but he does good.
I think Mark Ruffalo does a good job, but but part of it too is Tim Roth is just is a great actor.
Yeah.
Have you seen the movie, the TV show Lie to Me?
No, I'm not.
It's on. I think it's still on Netflix. It had Tim Roth in it. He plays a guy that basically he read micro expressions and use it to solve murders and stuff like that. So
cool.
It's I'm doing a bad job of explaining it, but it's really worth watching.
I had a guest on the podcast that told me this kind of conspiracy theory that the lady from Murder, She Wrote,
Angela Lansbury,
was a serial killer. Like Dexter level, man.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah, it was a stretch, but
show me the documentation.
Yeah, let's do a podcast about it.
Yeah, I'm fine with that as long as you have evidence.
So, do you require your students to do a podcast for the class?
Absolutely, and it has to be, and it only has to be short. But they have to to demonstrate they have a plan. I mean, I'm not talking about a script because obviously that would suck, but they have to have a plan, and they have to be able to work the hardware and the software. They have to be able to deal with file naming conventions and metadata, and I want them to have basic audio editing.
I would like to talk to you more about that after we, because right now they make me require this paper, and it's like, man, if they ruin this last test, which they did, and I don't think I'm breaking any, confidentiality or whatever, but they bombed it. There was one whole page everybody missed, and it was like, this was the last lecture. Come on. Oh, yeah, wait, y'all didn't come to class.
Yeah.
It's like, and two, like, I didn't read, those are the ones I'm like, here are the names. I'm not reading you the answers in the review, which I gave a review. 22 people out of 32 showed up for the review where I'm like, this is the test.
Right.
I was going to read it.
One thing I've tried is the review session. What I had the students do is get together in groups and write test questions.
I've done that.
But I also, like, I have Bloom's taxonomy up on the screen. It's like, look, you have to write test questions that don't just have, you have to remember stuff, because that's what Google's for. Why make people memorize stuff? They have to see themselves in it, huh? Right? They have to be able to.
So I'm not big on, like, dates, for example.
Yeah.
So like I said, 1266, like, and as soon as you said, I was
you could have looked that crap up, though.
Yeah.
Battle of Hastings, it came up 1066. That's, so what? But, and then, take all their test questions and literally the good ones and make the test out of those. But
I've done that. I've done 2 tests. I did that for both because I don't know. I'm trying to think of more creative ways. Like, I'm gonna have to spend way less time writing lectures next semester. I'm doing it again in the summer.
It's so nice to have done it once.
I know, and then I got to turn right around and so, like, I'm probably gonna apply for, I don't know how many classes or office hours, and they're probably gonna apply to. They're doing a full-time spot. The other guy's an Arkansas historian. He's retiring after this semester, and that leaves like one adjunct that's retired once already and teaches like 1 or 2 classes. That's like, maybe it was like the former academic affairs VP or something like that, assistant vice chancellor, something like really higher up. Dr. Flowers, he might have even done some stuff with tech over the years. I remember seeing his name around, but he's retired and kind of comes back and has an office and teaches a class. But then there's this guy named Trey McCool, and that's it. As far as they have American government person.
That's a cool name, because isn't it in French? Trey is like very
McCool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not making fun of your name, dude. I'm saying it's awesome.
So is your name MC or MAC?
MC.
That's what.
And really, when you look at Clan Arthur, there is a lot of different ways to spell McArthur. Just means son of or of Arthur. But I've seen tons of different variations. So like General McArthur spells it MAC, but he's a member of Clan Arthur. We're related somewhere. I mean, it might be 1,000 years back. So it's not a close relation.
So you're related to King Arthur.
Exactly.
What you're saying.
That's
look at you.
The Arthur, Clan Arthur. Actually, what I think is really cool is our clan motto is Fide et Opera, which is Latin for by faith and work, which I think is very cool.
Yeah, no. That's speaking of work, we got to talk about your wrestling.
Okay.
Because that's how we first met.
Yeah.
Like, here's a funny backstory real quick. So I remember just growing up, like I was in my 20s, working in the history department, and before Dr. Neal came, which I was actually her GA one semester, right? So like obviously we connected, and I was glad she came.
Those of you who never got to meet Dr. Carolyn Neal, you missed a fantastic lady.
She was
something special.
She was such a big supporter and fan of Court and I and stuff. And I think I got drunk with her one time. We definitely drank a lot of champagne together.
That's awesome.
But then she like took me downstairs and was like, "Now, if Cora ever throws you out, you can live in this room." I was like, "Whoa, I don't want to be thrown out by Cora, but thank you. I'll keep that in the back of my mind. It's a nice room." But she, so like I'm obviously happy that she came to Tech. But before that, they interviewed this Korean guy. that was like a 4th degree judo guy or something, like a judo black belt. And like he gave this lecture where he was talking about this Japanese sailor that crashed and was in China and came back and brought this back, and like this fascinating story. These 3 different guys that by pure happenstance got, shipwrecked or kidnapped and absorbed this other parts of these other cultures and brought them back, and how it was an influence. And he had even done talked about he had done some of that in martial arts. And I'm like, oh man, you guys gotta hire this guy. And I mean, I was pumped. And then they hired Dr. Neil, and I was like,
what is wrong with
it's
you?
Like, screw you guys. I was like upset about it. And then I almost didn't want to give Dr. Neil a chance. I'm like, you hiring this lady, what are you doing? But I only wanted to train with the guy. But then they hired you, and I was like, all right, that repaid. Thank you. Because so you're 2-time All-American heavyweights.
Right. In high school, I'm a 2-time state champion, 3-time freestyle state champion. And then in college, I'm an All-American. So I wrestled at JC, but it was the best JC in the nation. My coach had 8 national titles and 135 All-Americans.
Wow.
And
what's your coach's name?
Owen. Crap, what's his first name? And the reason I'm confused by this, let me explain, is there's 6 Owen brothers, and they're all wrestling coaches, and I wrestled for Bob
family
and Bill in high school, and crap, it's not like I wrestled for him for 2 years. Coach Owen.
Yeah, Coach Owen.
I've been hitting the head a lot, man. But what was the question? You were just talking about your college wrestling, JC. So my freshman year, I took first in regionals, and then I got a nasty skin infection and couldn't work out in between regionals and nationals, and I lost in the round that would have taken me into the medal rounds.
Was it face herpes?
Yeah, it was.
That's like, why do wrestlers exclusively get, I mean, before I ever knew you, I knew wrestlers with face herpes.
Yeah, it sucks too. It's like you don't want to tell people, I have herpes, because I don't have. It's a different strain.
I know. That's a horrible way to put it.
Yeah, but it's on your face. That's a great place to have it. So people can see. Like, look at that. So by the time I got out on the mat, I was out of gas. I ran it. Anyways, my sophomore year, I separated my ribs in the quarterfinals, and beat that guy. And then I went to the semifinals, and I lost to a guy that I'd beaten 3 times earlier in the year because I hurt so bad.
Yeah.
Because don't separate your ribs. It sucks. And
we just had the adrenaline going in the match that you beat him and finished, and then by the time you fought again,
it went. I mean, my sister heard it in the stands, Pah! And I'm like, I got to get out there and finish before the adrenaline wears off. And it was funny because the guy that I was wrestling knew that I had done it because, I'm like, ah. And at one point, he was on my back, and he's grinding his fist into my ribs, but he was grinding it on the wrong side. I mean, the right side, because I'd hurt on the left side.
Story, yeah.
He was grinding it on the right side, and once I realized what he was doing, I went, because I didn't want him to realize that
Eddie Bravo talks about stuff like that all the time.
Yeah. So I ended up winning by points. But my first match in the consolation round, I'm out there and I'm just getting my butt kicked because, I can barely breathe, and I'm out there trying to wrestle and just getting worked, and I snapped. I absolutely no technique in this. I just and I tackled the guy, just launched at him and tackled him and pinned him. Boom. And then I went the consolation finals, and I lost. I took 4th. But top 8 is All-American, and I took 4th at Nationals, so I'm an All-American. But that match, I lost it. You've seen that face.
Yeah, it's a crazy face. I like it. Yeah. Dude, I remember one day we were rolling, and we got in like a heated scramble, and I ended up hitting you with like an ankle sweep or something, and you rear rolled out of it, and you came up and we're like, in this bass,
like,
and then the bell went off, and you were just like,
yeah.
But man, that stuff will keep you alive. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's give you a chance to do something like that again.
It's like the wrestler mentality. It's like, look, if you're stomping on my face, I'm going to try and bite your foot.
The
really?
oil check knee bar escape. I that's the way I do a knee bar now.
Yeah.
I do it so you can't use your other leg to put it in my butt. So that's a common way people get out of a knee bar in jiu-jitsu.
Talking about snapping, you're talking about being Rickson?
Hickson
Gracie's workout partner. So
it's spelled with an R, so you had it on point.
So when I was a junior, in between my junior and senior year of high school, I wrestled for Team Montana, and I went and spent 3 weeks in France.
Wow.
Going around Paris and wrestling with community wrestling clubs and being a tourist. Like, I got to spend 2 days in the Louvre, which is freaking awesome. Walk around the corner, like, oh, there's the Venus de Milo. Oh, there's Winged Victory. There's the Mona Lisa, which, by the way, is really small, and there's so many people around it, you can barely see it and stuff.
Yeah.
But anyways, it was very cool. But at one point, we're at this neighborhood wrestling club, and there was a guy there who I don't know his name, but the year before he was number 1 in Africa, and he was 4th in the world. And so I was rolling with him, and he was
in a heavyweight.
It was either 189 or heavyweight. I only weighed about 220 at the time.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah,
wow.
I was all cut. Now I'm just like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. I weigh the same as a baby killer whale.
We'll give you Mr. Clean.
Oh, okay.
Okay, you got some traps going on up here. Like when you grab me, I definitely know that you're a strong person.
So I'm rolling with this guy, and he's, in his mind, he's rolling with a high school kid. I take him down.
Which I'm sure he appreciated.
No. He proceeded to beat the crap out of me for, and not like, punched me, but, oh man, he, a black guy, and he had really short hair. And so I it was like I'd taken a piece of sandpaper all over my face and upper body, and I was just bruised all over. He'd take me down and cut me and take me down. And I was like, but I took him down. It's like, that'll tell you to, take things serious.
Those experiences, they kind of change you, getting to roll or be around somebody that's of that high of a level. I say that about being with the Hickson thing. It's like, I only got to spend 4 hours with that guy. Mm-hmm. And I've got to spend a lot of time with Jack, who only teaches Hickson stuff pretty much. And it just had such a profound impact on me. I can't, like I was talking about this morning, all we did was Hickson's techniques or Jack techniques that I've imported. I had a beginner there, and even the guy that has been there, is like right at a blue belt level, Marvin. Mm-hmm. He was there, and he picked up 2 or 3 things. And it's like we did flow drill 1 and a hip mount escape, a hip out mount escape. But it's just like I've just refined the way I do it over the years. Speaking of Hickson, there he is, being like, he wants to be on the podcast.
Well, it's been really good that I'm glad you guys finally talked me into coming to force it.
You came I feel like pretty quick after you moved here, right?
Yeah. Well, the last time I had been on the mat was essentially 1997 when the last year I wrestled in college. Yeah. And, I'd helped out with some high school and junior high teams and stuff, but that was coaching. That wasn't competing at all, just showing stuff. But it was really nice to get back on the mat and doing some kind of exercise that didn't feel like a punishment. I mean, like the treadmill literally was used in prisons to turn grinding wheels and stuff. I mean, it was a torture device.
They have an episode of Bike Mirror that's kind of like that. Yeah, they make them ride these bikes.
And exercise equipment's running. Oh man, well, when you're as big as I am, running is really hard on your knees, stuff. But I can go out on the mat and roll, and it's been a lot of fun coaching. I coach mostly coach takedowns and stuff, but being older and getting a lot more perspective on what my coaches were doing, I can see the system works, and I understand fundamentals at a much different level. So I don't know, and it's been very, very satisfying too to as I've shared some of the things that I've learned watching other competitors. I like watching Evil do takedowns. It makes me feel really good to know that I helped her get better.
Yeah, without you being
takedowns.
there, we don't do that knee press single. We don't do run the pipes as much. I mean, not on that level, especially. Like, I know some takedowns and have learned some even since you and I have met and learned tons of stuff from you.
But even just like the basics, like penetration.
Puts it all in perspective, Yeah, exactly. You like, so when you show up, people are like, I'm relying on you to learn takedowns. I know you've worked with competitors before, world competitions, and people definitely do get that single leg. And one of the biggest things I took away from you is, honestly, I feel like hand fighting for some reason. I don't know, you just showed a few things, and I feel like I can stand up, and if people collar tie me, I do it 2-on-1.
Do that hand drag.
I just like arm drags, and I just got a lot more sensitive with that. And then like that arcing footwork. And then switching, like they step out of the singles, like you just taught that stuff. Like, that's some of the best, my most favorite stuff you've taught. And the arm drag to singles, and you've got a lot of great entries that were eye-opening for me.
When I was talking about, getting older and getting perspective, when I was taught to wrestle, I was taught, that arcing movement to set up entries for takedowns. But as I'm older, I really see how the whole system works. I mean, a lot of people, when they step out on the mat, they're looking for opportunities, people leaving a leg forward, but now I see how you can set that up, and given how they respond, how they move, the algorithm you use to, like, oh, they're doing exactly this, I'm going to use this attack, and I don't know, intellectually it's satisfying to me.
We have nerded out maybe a couple of times on the podcast, definitely before the podcast with the computer stuff, but they were just said this on Joe Rogan as well, but I've heard Eddie Bravo say this before, but Eddie Bravo, Jiu-Jitsu black belt, he calls jiu-jitsu guys nerd assassins, right? Because you're like you just said algorithm talking about your wrestling, and it's like, man, the way I process jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, everything is just in these. Dude, when I took the class Logic, it hit a whole other level. I remember going to Dr. Bush's office and be like, I made these truth tables out of these boxing combos, and it just took over this, like, the way I organized patterns of information.
Well, and it makes total sense, because the reason that you drill things is to make things automatic. And if you look at, if you view it as like battle, you have a set of responses based on people's responses to your actions. And depending on how they respond, well, then you have a different set of programmed responses to, and if you can make those responses automatic, you're going to have such a greater advantage, because you don't have to take time to stop and think, oh, they're doing that, how I'm going to respond. It's, the algorithm says, I respond this way. The algorithm responds this way.
So I see that as something totally different than technique. It's like a conceptual strategy.
Right.
Like there's Joe Louis, this famous kickboxer. It's Lewis, not Lewis like the boxer for World War II era. But he has this quote that says, tactics become strategies. So you have to, like, I had to learn why I probably remarked on those two things is because I had just a little bit of wrestling before we met, and then everything I learned from you, but those two things seem to tie it all into perspective, like having some footwork and some, hey, we don't have grips, but I'm going to get some grips. What grips would I like to get? Like just the entries of in general, and then like, I don't know if I got this, but just like the idea of like going head and bicep. That's my favorite tie to do. It doesn't. I do that in the gi even all the time, but I really enjoy just getting those inside ties, body locks, and stuff like that.
Well, and I enjoy your approach because, well, one of the reasons I like jiu-jitsu is that it's take what works and get rid of the rest, and you're really willing to to do that in everything. If it works, keep it. If not, and it's fun to go and teach people that come from a different background, come from a striking background or whatever, and I can give them a little piece that if they take that into the striking world, they're going to, most people aren't going to have seen that, aren't going to have an answer to that. And, like the other day when I was in there and you had me show something to your judo class, I have 0 judo classes. I have never practiced
and in my
judo.
mind, and I'm a judo black belt, but in my mind, I'm like, oh, it's this throw and this throw. It's Morote Gori and judo, and it's
right. And so what you didn't see is when you was like, hey, do you want to do something? I sat down with my phone and I had some ideas, and I looked up some judo throws that I thought were related to what I know, and I was like, oh, okay, well, this is what I'm going to take from it as a wrestler. So I'm going to show it from the wrestler's perspective on how to do it in judo. And so maybe you roll in with someone who's a judo person. They might not recognize
Kano
that detail.
admittedly took like the Kataguruma throw. It's shoulder wheel is what Kataguruma means, but he took that from a book on Western wrestling. It's the fireman's carry.
Mm-hmm.
And he writes this in his own journal. We had a judo black belt that was in from like Mississippi or something, comes in a week at a time during an outage at the nuke plant that was just in.
Right.
And he was kind of like not happy that we only have a 45-minute judo class, but it's like there's so few people come right now, and we do it for free class. And then, but like when he was doing our groundwork, and I really try and dovetail those two classes together a lot, but he was just like, oh man, like you guys' groundwork is insane. And I was talking to him in all of the Japanese terms. I'm like, well, this is, Okiri Urijime, and just like telling him, we're going to counter Tomonagi, and just talking lingo with him, and made him feel super relaxed. But I'm like, yeah, this is Newaza, and
right.
So it's
it dovetails really well with my wrestling training, because I wrestled for 2 brothers who had 4 other brothers that were wrestling coaches. So when they got together at family events, it was a wrestling clinic every time. And
imagine being a fly on the wall for that, which you were, I guess.
Yeah. And so and we'd go to workshops or training camps or whatever, and there were always some Owen brothers there, and so I got to benefit from that kind of group approach to how to do it. It was great because it was never a question of, well, this is the way we've always done it. It was a question of, is there a better way to do it? And this is what works until something better comes along, and then we'll do that.
I'm totally that mindset, and I try and come across that way. I've learned so many better ways of doing things, and a lot of those things are things that I learned 10, 11 years ago. So I'm coming up on 11 and a half years. I'm actually getting promoted to black belt in 2 days. So,
Sweet.
It's been 11 and a half years of training for the most part. Maybe 11 years and 3 months is what it's going to end up being. 11 years, 4 months, something like that. But it's been a process of refinement. Like I've moves like the Americana, or even the rear naked choke, the guillotine choke, the straight ankle lock. These are all moves that in the last 2 to 3 years I have learned drastically more efficient ways to do them. It doesn't mean that I never tapped anybody with them previously. It doesn't mean that they were ineffective in the other way. But if you really look at it, it's like, oh, this is a better way. It's irrefutably a better way.
Well, it's the same way you'll look at a woodworker. You get the beginner has the same set of tools in their hands that a master does, but just little subtle movements. The gross movements are the same between an apprentice and a master, but it's the little subtleties in how they use those tools that differentiate between the novice and the master.
Man, so we talked about St. Thomas, right? This was
St. Thomas. Didn't talk about Portugal.
Oh yeah, we gotta. Yeah, let's wrap up with that. And Yeah, so I had like a kind of a checklist in my head. I used to like have a notepad of like, and I just like it was to be distracting, I felt like. So I just set it over there and write on it when you leave. But I was like, I'd leave notes like, I'm going to hashtag this. And like, man, I'm just going to upload this and hashtag it all after I get it in the upload. And, it's usually pretty much not an issue.
Yeah.
I'm ordering some lunch right now.
Yeah. Well, my brother-in-law and my wife tried calling me, but my wife knows where I'm at, and she just texted never mind, so that's good. I don't know what I'm not never minding.
Yeah, I that's all right. Yeah, Housnick's texted me for a private lesson, then we're gonna do a private tomorrow, and then go eat some breakfast and do a podcast.
Breakfast.
Yeah. You're welcome to go with us.
No.
Have you ever had the Philly omelet from Stobie's?
I have not.
You should, dude.
I'm just saying breakfast because I haven't had breakfast.
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah, that's like Corey's texted me, and I was like, let me follow up on this because I don't want to miss this opportunity to have a Stromboli brought home to me. So recently, ironically, one time I was coming back from Worlds, and I look over and I see a figure in my peripheral, and they're wearing a Forza shirt, you might even have had the Forza headband on, I don't know, but like I'm like, that's the logo of
I only wear the headband at the gym to keep the sweat out of my eyes.
Yeah, so like I look over and I'm like, that's a logo, that's a laptop, that's a McArthur. And but so you've been I will say that I've kind of always had the perception that you've done really well as a historian, staying busy, and have pursued things that maybe are available to all historians, but all historians don't pursue in terms of grants. And I know you teach a class on grant writing, but you've been able to travel the globe essentially. So since you've been at Tech, what are some of the things you've been able to places you've been able to go see, and why?
Well, I talking about grants. Like I got a grant to attend a training at Lincoln, Nebraska, which is exciting if you like corn. But put on by the Association for Documentary Editing and the National Archives on how to do documentary editing. And I have a documentary, an edited volume, the Annals of the Southern Utah Mission. It was originally a 1,200-page handwritten history of Southern Utah that I've transcribed, edited everything. It's coming out later this year, which is awesome. I've had grants to go to various conferences, but the one in particular, talking about being a world traveler, is this last summer I got an email from our department chair, Dave Blanks, and he is like, hey, you should look at this conference. It was this conference, the first International Congress on Local History. It was in Portugal. I'm like, okay. That sounds
Dr.
cool.
Blanks has been a world traveler himself. I'm sure he's plugged into all sorts of networks.
Yeah, he lived in Egypt for 20 years, but he's he just recently went to Russia for a conference. Anyway, so I was actually camping with my son, Boy Scouts. I was out in the woods, but I had my Chromebook with me and my phone, which I can tether to. So like I found a place in camp where I had like one bar, so I could connect to the internet, and I could tether my Chromebook to it, and I wrote a conference proposal in one day and sent it from the woods, and that was accepted. And then I wrote a grant proposal to get the money to pay for it, and so I went to Portugal and spent 4 or 5 days there. I don't know, 20, 30. I spent 4 days in
beneficial
in Portugal.
Conference for you.
It was fantastic, and really. One of the things that, why would you have an international congress on local history? It sounds like something that if you're talking about local history, it'd be something that you wouldn't want to have to travel halfway around the globe for. But what I was talking about was the importance of the study of local history. I mentioned before, talking about as a public historian, I want to make people see themselves in the story. Well, most people don't. Most people you talk to and you talk about history, like, oh, I hate history. Because they don't really hate history. They just they've had bad history teachers that make them memorize names and dates and haven't been able to teach them how to recognize themselves in the story. And what I was saying in my presentation there's a big problem with what is being taught and when is being taught when you're talking about educational standards. Because my wife teaches second grade, and we talk about some of the things she's supposed to do. And like in second grade, she's supposed to one of the things, tell people get them to recognize the difference between primary and secondary sources, and help them recognize their role as historic actors. I can't remember the words that they use, but that's essentially it. Recognize their place in history, their place in the community. These kids are in second grade. They do not understand their concept of historic actors. If you look at the way teachers are taught, you look at the writings of Jean Piaget, talking about developmental stages, and at that point, kids are still very egocentric, and they don't get logic, but they can understand stories. So instead of teaching them, your place in society and this is how you fit in your community, why don't we teach them, our national stories, Washington crossing the Delaware, the things that the stories that will help them develop patriotism and
really
pride in place and stuff.
Book I know of, it's called American Stories. Jeff Woods used to use it for his U.S. History 2 class, actually.
Yeah, and instead of trying to teach them how to analyze documents and their place in the world, do that after they turn 11 or 12 or something, when they can understand those concepts a little bit better. But you see, the problem is educational specialists like to use what's known as scaffolding. And scaffolding really makes sense if you're talking about mathematics. You have to understand how to add, subtract, divide, multiply before you talk about deeper concepts. If you're a scientist, you need to know how to measure. You need to know the measurement system. You need to know about cause and effect and all of that. So scaffolding works in that way, and that's what they're attempting to do with history. But the problem is they're teaching concepts that they're unable to understand. They need to do that later in the process. And then there's another problem in that it's what is being taught. I like to refer to it as the tyranny of completeness. So when I first got to Tech, when the class I was assigned to teach, History 1903, is supposed to cover U.S. history from primordial ooze to the present day, but be complete in one semester. You have to cover everything.
Man,
and the question is, you're tasked with teaching the entirety of U.S. history in a way that teaches them everything they need to know. Good luck with
25 sessions or something.
And so what the educational standards do is that the phrase, you can't lead a horse to water. They're trying to lead the student horses to water, and then when they can't drink it all, they're waterboarding them with facts. And then they have standardized tests that they have to regurgitate all of this stuff that they've crammed down their throat, and all of their ability to be able to process this, how does this relate to me, was training that they received in second and third grade that they don't remember because they were emotionally incapable of accessing that. Also, too, when I'm talking about local history, this is where the local history thing ties in, is they talk about local history stuff when they're younger. Why don't they talk about it while they're a little bit later, where they can say, look, these things that we're talking about, these concepts that we're talking about, let's do it in a way where you can visit the places that are impacted, where you can see how these things make an impact in your life right here. And so, like an example I want to use, like one thing you might see in textbooks is like the Great Chicago Fire, right? Cyrus O'Leary's Cow, which is more about anti-immigration than it was about anything else, because Miss O'Leary was Irish, and we don't even really know if she had a cow. But if we want to talk about fires and destroying things, why don't we teach in Russellville about the fire in 1906 that burned down most of,
I've seen pictures.
We can talk about C&D drug that is still there. We can talk about the series, the way that the streets are laid out, We have Arkansas in the middle, and then west of Arkansas are cities named west of the Mississippi, and then cities named east of the Mississippi, east of Arkansas, and then we have Main Street, and then we have A, B, C, D, E. When you go north, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as you go south. And the reason that is because if you look at the Sanborn maps, the fire insurance maps of Russellville before 1929, our street system was a mess. Like, we had a Jefferson Street that went north-south and a Jefferson that went east and west on opposite sides of Arkansas, which was then called Oak Street. And part of what that did is create a situation where, like, imagine you call up the fire department and say, I'm at 123 Jefferson, and they go to that 123 Jefferson instead of this one, and your house burns down. You could not get fire insurance in Russellville, and the state would not issue any funds for us to have a fire department. And so the Lions Club said, hey, let's create a system that actually makes sense. They looked at Tulsa, Oklahoma's system and said, let's modify that to work with us. And so we did it, and then the state issued funds that we could have a fire department. And so, we could teach students about, hey, maybe the importance of having fire insurance, or the importance of municipal planning, or how the government process works, because they can see how that impacted our community. Or if you want to talk about the railroads, the importance of railroads, instead of talking about, it allowed people to go west and grow grain, you could talk about how this county seat of Pope County used to be Dover, which now has 1,500 people or something, and small. Russellville has 30,000. Well, J.L. Shin, Dr. Thomas Russell essentially bribed the railroad to, hey, instead of going through Dover where you're surveyed to go through, you're all set to go through there, why don't you come through Russellville? Here's some money. And the railroad said, thanks for that money, we'll come through Russellville. And within 10 years, the county seat moved from Dover to Russellville.
Well, and that I think killed a town called Norristown.
Yeah.
That Hausnick, he's gonna be on tomorrow.
Yeah, he lives in Norristown.
Yeah, Nate's mom, Nate Murdoch, but yeah. She lives on Norristown.
She lives in Norristown,
yeah.
Right? And I live not that far from it. I'm up on Hilltop.
Yeah,
and so, but you see, people can relate to that. Like, I know where that community is. I've driven through there. I can relate to it. I mean, Americans trust museums more than any other source of history because they can see the thing. They can be in the presence of the thing, whatever the thing is. And having an increased focus on local history will allow people to understand the thing. I can see the thing. It's in my community. And if they want to do research, even the simple difference between what's a primary and a secondary source. If all of your sources come from the magic computer box here, what is the difference? They're all from the computer. But if you go and do actual primary source research in an archive, it becomes much clearer what is a primary source and what's a secondary source as you're digging through the actual person's papers or a book that is written about the community's history. Blah.
No, I mean, that's, Dr. Swain, when I had him in class, I took and did a paper over this, and I might have taken the class. I know he did the class. I can't remember if I took it, but it was a central topic in every class he taught, like place and collective memory. Mm-hmm. That's, along the same lines of what you're talking about. It's like, what's your place here? Where, how are we all going to remember what's going on? How do we remember this? Well, piece of history, or like, the massacre, the wagon train thing we are talking about earlier. Yeah, that's why I was interested to see, pretty much how it's written in the history book. Right. I would say is apparently both sides of the fence agree, based off what's out there.
Part of the problem is people are like, we can't change what's being taught and when, because people are already, becoming less patriotic. They're caring less about their communities. We can't cut stuff out because if we cut stuff out, it's not being covered. Well, so what? It's being covered, but it's not making a difference. They're not learning it. So, the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, why not say, all right, let's try making people actually care about the history of their community, and then maybe they can draw some parallels to, how this, being an active citizen in their community, maybe that means I should be an active citizen in the country, anyways, whatever. No. What we're doing is not working. Let's fix it instead of making people memorize more.
We'll call it trickle up history.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know. I just made that up. Well, yeah. Well, did you see any good sights in Portugal? Did you get to drive anywhere else?
Well, I stayed in Cascais, which is 7-8 miles from Lisbon. It's essentially like the Beverly Hills. It's a nice place. I stayed there because that's where the conference was. But Lisbon has a pretty good public transit system. Just hopped on a train and headed down there. And the coolest things that I saw, and I'll send you some pictures, because the Belém Tower was built in the 1500s, and it was one fortification to protect the mouth of the river. There was a tower on the other side of the river that's no longer standing there, but it was awesome. I went to the Castle of St. George, which was actually built by the Moors. And then when the Christians took it over, they renamed it. I don't know what it was called when the Moors built it, but it was St. George when it was taken over. And so it was up on the hill looking over the city. Yeah, it was freaking awesome. Went to a cathedral. Went to the UNESCO World Heritage Site, the St. Geronimo Monastery. I went all over the place, and too, because I'm LDS, the church is building a temple in Lisbon. I went and saw the temple site under construction, and like the walls were coming up and stuff. That was pretty cool.
Let me ask you this: okay. Would you consider the LDS a minority religion? Like, how do you historically? Because I want to do a series of history podcasts on sort of, I would say, homegrown religion. That has little, or maybe it has outside influence, but here in the United States.
I guess, yes. I guess you could say minority in that, worldwide there's 20 million members. In the United States, there's, 7-8 million, and there's approaching 300 million people in the United States. So in that sense, it's a minority.
I'm trying to find a title to encompass, Puritans and Mormonism and maybe even Scientologists all in the same, without offending anyone.
I guess part of one of the big differences is that in Christianity there's essentially three branches. There's the Catholics or Orthodox.
I just taught the Reformation.
Yeah, that Peter established the church, and it's continued.
He's the first pope, right?
Right. That's the argument. Or you have the Protestant churches that say, look, authority is not important. What is important is your relationship with Jesus Christ, and everything else you can just try and do the best you can. Just accept Jesus, your Lord and Savior, and you're good. Well, what if you're LDS, it is the church that Jesus Christ established fell apart. The authority was taken. It was restored through Joseph Smith. So you have, it never left. Authority doesn't matter, and the authority was restored. And sheer numbers, that would make us a minority in saying that authority has been restored.
Yeah, that's 20 million worldwide. I did not know that. Mm-hmm. So that's what's fascinating to me as well is, what did it say? Not say religion, denominations. That's probably the best way to put it. So denominations of Christianity, which I would say Jehovah's Witness, is to see their worldwide memberships, or to see something like, there's a Lutheran church here in Russellville. There's one between here and my parents' house. And to know that that's only been a thing since the 1540s.
Right. Well, and, even among Lutherans, which synod? Are you in the Wisconsin Synod? Are you in the Missouri Synod? And, Baptist, are you, which congregation? I mean, there are different types of Baptists and conferences, I guess. is if you're Baptist, so that matters.
I've been getting into that just from like when I went through the Reformation. I mean, I really got into learning about Calvinism and Lutheranism, right? Those are the main focuses of the course, obviously. But I've always been fascinated with that, and I'm trying to think of just some sort of way to be able to talk about open-minded, or even have guests on, and talk about all of these different religious histories. I mean, like a survey of world religions, but more in like denominations. Like hey, we're going to do 6 lesser known denominations of Christianity, or or do one where you like, wait, that would be a great podcast, is the 3 branches, just to give people some perspective. Because I remember even as an undergrad when we did the Reformation, I didn't take the class on it, but when I got it in Civ, and I think we might have hit on it in, I believe I took the class, the Renaissance.
Mm-hmm.
There was some other Dr. Dykema class I took, and we hit the Reformation. I remember learning it. And I was just like, oh, God. And then I'm like teaching it, and I'm like, guys, this is awesome. Like, listen here about this Martin Luther and his table and his beer, and he might have got struck by lightning. I was all pumped telling them about all the stuff I had been learning, and they're just like, God, dude, shut up. Like, that stuff with the Mongols was cool. But
yeah. Well, no, it's funny because I get tons of emails from various textbook publishers, and I teach online a lot, and they're always trying to sell me their prepackaged class. And to me, that, I was hired to teach the class, not teach what someone else developed. And one of the reasons I would never use one of the prepackaged systems is like, I got my stories that I think are totally awesome, that I am totally passionate about, and I want to share those stories. And I do a good job sharing those stories. Your stories are different. And so if they take a class from you, they're going to get a completely different experience. Not better, not worse, but different, because you're passionate about different things. And that's one thing I love is that you can go to a university or, community college or whatever, and usually take the same class, the survey classes at least, from different people, and get different perspectives on what's important.
Yeah, see, like, we're getting into the territory where a lot of the stuff I'm covering, I've had whole courses on.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so French Revolution and Arab Napoleon, had a class on that.
Napoleon wasn't short. He's 5'7".
The Enlightenment. I've been joking about people in height. Like, somebody's like, yeah, yesterday I was texting me. He's like, I'm 5'5.5". He's like, emphasis on
that's funny. I tell people I'm 198 centimeters.
Oh,
because
man.
when people are like, how tall are you? Because when you're tall, people feel justified in asking you how tall you are. And a lot of times, particularly if it's a woman, I feel like saying, how much do you weigh?
Yeah.
It's like, what's the metric that describes you?
That is a personal question.
But I tell them, I'm 198 centimeters. And when they're like, I don't know metrics, I go, not my problem.
That's funny, man. Burn. Yeah. So you're 6'6", is that correct?
Well, kind of.
You're 6'6".
I was 6'6" when I graduated from high school, but I have 3 bulging discs and a herniated disc, and I'm about 6'5".
Yeah.
Really. So I don't know. I tell people I'm 6'6", but I'm probably
you were
like
tall. That's why people would.
I'm a freak of nature.
Yes, you have very long arms.
Well, yeah, like the average person, fingertip to fingertip length is your height. That's one of the ways they figure out how long to make the bottom of your shirt and how long to make the sleeves. But my fingertip to fingertip, 6'11 and a half.
Wow.
So it's the same wingspan as Michael Jordan. I just wish I had the same bank account as Michael Jordan.
There you go. But. So what was so wild to me is you came in, and this guy's still coming, Matt Hall. He's going to come on the podcast. He played football in the NFL for the Colts. And
the Vikings.
And the Vikings, yeah. And he's 6'10".
Yep.
So like when we're over against a matter wall one day and you're there, and it's like one of his first couple classes, and you're like hands on your hips looking up, talking to him.
That was bizarre.
I was like, I am what? Because it's usually me talking to you like that. But when he walks in, I'm just like, dude, you're a descendant of giants. I mean, it's wild how how tall that he is.
It was fun that day that we rolled, and I could see him getting so frustrated because he's used to physically dominating people, and I might be old and fat, but I'm wily, and and he just couldn't get a hold of me, and
he's come a long way, but
I was thinking to myself, when this dude gets some skills, I'm screwed.
Have you ever seen a bigger person like that? And maybe not, but that didn't wrestle or something. But like he was kind of, and I think part of it was this. I think it's like when I roll with you, it's like, well, how do I solve this puzzle? There's a size difference. But it's no different than when I roll with Kim Van Leuven or Freeman, who is 105 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
It's like she's got to solve the same puzzle. So a lot of it, I think, is body types than anything. Is him trying to figure out how to roll with smaller people, and it's kind of awkward.
It very much so.
Yeah, you blew my mind too when we first met. You're like, because you're a single leg guy. I would say you got some good you do a lot of that leg flare style, knee tap double, whatever you want to call it, and I like that takedown a lot too, and do it that high crotched. But you're like, why would I go for a double and get stuck underneath someone that weighs what I weigh?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I never thought about it that way. And then I read that book, Wrestling for Fighting by Randy Couture. He's like, well, when you single someone, you only have to deal with half their power.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, these two guys, they seem to have it figured out. I'm going to do what they say. I singled someone yesterday, and I've expanded my perspective so much on singles over the last 5 years. Mm-hmm. It's remarkable. So
yeah, when you're doing a double, it makes penetration especially important because you got to knock them off balance when you enter in.
So what I like is your doubles from singles, right? So like when it's a high crotch or and that's kind of something I like, chain wrestling or combinations, and I've been able to really tie on a lot of stuff and got stolen a lot of little two takedown combos from you over the time we've known each other. So it's been a mutually beneficial relationship.
It has, very much so.
Well, right on, man. Well, appreciate you coming on. If you ever have anything like a book coming out, paper being published, anything, we'd love to have you back on. If you want to do an episode and watch NCAA wrestling on the TV and commentate, we can do that. Plus, I'll be talking to you about this computer idea.
Okay.
So, because I'm definitely going to want to, I got that website pulled up before we started, so I'm definitely going to start seeing what we can figure out about that.
Good deal.
All right, man.
All right.
On. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah.
See, this I'll get this on iTunes like right away, and then it will be on like those 8 different audio forms. You're my 17th Life Unraveled.